Welcome to What Drives You, where we explore our human potential and seek the most efficient and effective personal growth methods and celebrate the miracle of just being alive. I'm your honored guide, Kevin Miller. In this episode, how to take responsibility instead of give blame. The claim of a masterclass has gotten really popular as of late. I've used it as well. Though so far, I've only seen it used in regards to one expert giving their best wisdom. Friends, in this episode, I sit with 3 top therapists for an in-depth discussion on the core issues of taking responsibility versus giving blame in our lives. The episode, it's more than a masterclass of just knowledge. I feel we flipped some aspects of responsibility and blame upside down and brought forth new paradigms that will free you from misrepresentations that we have in the culture and equip you with fresh understanding and great motivation to want to take responsibility. I recorded live with a live audience and we addressed questions in real time. This is a new show format that we're going to continue. You can find it and sign up so you can be a part. wisdomsessions.live. The next session is about to open for registration. So again, you can go now, no cost. You attend free and ask live questions. So my dear and incredibly down-to-earth and insightful guest panel for this session on responsibility, they were all past guests. Britt Frank. She's a neuropsychotherapist and human behavior expert. She's author of The Science of Stuck. Terry Cole, psychotherapist and relationship and empowerment expert and author of Boundary Boss. And Vienna Farron, renowned New York City marriage and family therapist, author of The Origins of You. Friends, we got real. You're going to hear some stronger language than I usually retain in the shows, but I feel it was used judiciously. We laughed a lot, and they about brought me to tears as they guided me in some of these concepts. The instantaneous AI compilation of the discussion right away started with these highlights. I thought they were really insightful. Taking responsibility empowers individuals to make positive change in their lives. Next one, cultural factors such as a litigious society and the influence of social media can contribute to a lack of responsibility. Knowing oneself and defining one's own narrative is crucial in taking responsibility. Personal responsibility does not mean denying the reality of past injuries or traumas. There is a need for nuance in understanding personal responsibility and the role it plays in relationships. Taking responsibility in relationships involves becoming curious and understanding the context of our actions and our reactions. That was just some of the top of about 20 points it pulled out. Feedback from the live audience on this session was literally 10 out of 10. If you want to watch the session so you can see who's actually talking, go to YouTube. You can find me, just search in YouTube for @KevinMillerCO, @KevinMillerCO. You can go watch it in YouTube. I have a feeling this is going to be watched a lot. And if you've got some comments, questions, you can always email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Friends, here you go. Next up, I am with these 3 incredible therapists, and we go in depth talking about responsibility versus blame. This is some of the best I've ever had to offer. Here we go. Folks, we are live and we are starting this first Wisdom Sessions.live talking about responsibility versus blame. And I have these amazing people on the show. And that's the story of how this concept for Wisdom Sessions, this roundtable, came together. It was these humans right here that led me to it, because I had them each on my show only to find out they are all good friends, they're colleagues as fellow therapists. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love talking with them one-on-one, but it's so fun to hear their context and so insightful. Let's come together. And so what a gift. We're doing this here now. Someday I want us in the same room with a bunch of pillows and some tea, and we'll do this live. But for this right here, This is what we're going to do. So we're going to talk about this today. We're going to be paying attention to the chats and your questions and feedback. I'm not somebody that's looking for 5 billion people to tell me hi from Miami or Paris. So if you have a question though, and something that you're really curious about, or you feel like is really relevant feedback, please put it in there and we want to talk about it. So Britt, Terry, Vienna, I'll have given you a proper intro in the podcast, but here with people who registered, they should have seen your bios, know what you're about. I wanted to kick off really with the takeaway. I mean, we're going to talk about the issue, but ultimately we're here because it just hit me that, we don't wake up in the morning and go, man, today I'm excited about being responsible. That's just really top of the list. I want the result. I really just want some control in my life. I want to quit feeling out of control, quit feeling like a victim, yada, yada. So when we look at the payoff, what do you look at this? I mean, you guys are meeting with therapists every day. You're on your own journeys every day. And you're going, okay, let's talk about responsibility because we're seeing the problem, but that's easy to start too. I want to go here. What are your first thoughts on, okay, here's the opportunity with responsibility. Anyone chime in?
Okay, I'll start.
Yep.
So the opportunity is to actually be empowered in your life. Because when you think about it, if we are consciously or unconsciously in a victim position of blaming others, they have all the power over us. And so one really bright and beautiful takeaway is that when we really take responsibility for ourselves, we are empowered to make changes that we want to in our lives. My mother has this magnet on her refrigerator from a parent to child, and it says, I promise not to take credit for your accomplishments if you promise not to blame me for your failures.
Wow.
And that was there my entire life. So I was very clear, even young, about responsibility,
Deanna, Britt, payoffs. What comes to mind?
The prizes for being an adult. Oh, sorry, V, you go ahead.
No, you started. Go for it. We'll get our rhythm down here.
We'll get it down.
God. So the prizes for taking responsibility are, it's funny because the whole, I don't want to adult, I can't adult today, this idea that somehow the stage of childhood is somehow superior to adulthood. But the prizes that come with being a responsible adult are having a self-led life where you get to make choices and design things rather than even a kid with the most amazing parents is still not in charge. I would not want to trade the ability to drive for having to be buckled in the back seat for anything. So the art of adulthood is a very good prize to win.
The art of adulthood. I like that.
I love that too.
Can I say something before V to what Britt just said that I think it just like sparked me? When we were growing up, so I just turned 60 in March. And when I was growing up, we couldn't wait to get out, like, bye-bye. I cannot wait to get out of this house. I had a perfectly fine upbringing. I graduated college. My parents were like, good luck. We believe in you. Like, I had a garbage bag full of my clothing and I think $200.
Yeah.
And I was pumped. I was like, oh my God, I'm in real life now. Yay. And so I do think that there's a generational something that is happening for lots of reasons. The world has changed. A lot has changed. But Britt, you bring up this great point of even then, even when I was 18, I was well aware that adulting, even if it meant being broke as a joke, which of course I was, sleeping in a laundry room in Syosset, Long Island for $200 a month, but it was my laundry room. It was my life. Those were, as the magnet said on my mother's thing, those were my experiences to have without this overwatch of adult. My parents were like, let me get you an apartment. You know what I mean? They were like, you're going to figure it out. We believe in you. See ya. So I feel like there is something to what you said that really is valuable, that the prize of adulting is just that, is being the boss of ourselves in a real way.
Yeah, I would add that part of the prize is that your shame and guilt and embarrassment aren't the things that are crippling you in life, because I think when we're not taking responsibility, it means that shame, embarrassment, guilt are in the driver's seat. right? We're having to become so self-protective in those moments to point the finger at someone else. And so when we're pointing the finger at someone else, or we're taking over responsibility ourselves even, right? It's so misplaced. And it's when that's present, it means that those other things are present too. And I think to get to a point in life where we can see ourselves as individuals who are flawed or who said the wrong thing or who, disappointed someone or let someone down or whatever it might be, but that we just human, right? That we're in the human existence and experience, and that there's also room for that to be okay without it being something that annihilates us, right? Like there's such growth and wisdom to be able to hold ourselves with compassion and grace while also holding ourselves with responsibility, accountability, and ownership. It's how I see self-love, honestly, right? Is the intersection of those things. And I always say like one without the other doesn't work. Okay, you need to have the compassion and grace for self and the responsibility, ownership, and accountability piece come together. And when we can do that, I think we move from survival to choosing. And ultimately, that's what healing is.
You know, Vay, I want to say something about that is so prevalent in my therapy clients, that this ability to disappoint others, and as women, as high functioning women in particular, that, you know, what's her face has a book out that came out a long time ago, Cheryl Richardson, and it was called Let Me Disappoint You. And it was literally the art of like accepting that to actually live a self-driven life, we have to just get used to it. We just have to go, I cannot do what's best for me and do what everyone else wants me to do at all times, because those things don't go. And how much growth there is in just accepting, I am going to disappoint people and it's okay. I don't have to self-abandon to avoid that.
Yeah, one of the most powerful sentences from one of my favorite poems, The Dreamer by Araya, is I want to know if you can disappoint another to stay true to yourself. And I remember the first time that I read that line, it was at a time in my life where I was not capable of disappointing others. And it like pierced me in such a strong way, because it was like, oh my gosh, right? Like I am living a life in every moment of every day, doing backflips to make sure that I never disappoint someone else. Like that is intolerable to me. And so part of this is about us being able to tolerate that discomfort with other people, not getting it all of the time, being disappointed, feeling upset, being let down. Like there's a muscle that we are strengthening in this work to be able to tolerate that and not have it annihilate us as a human being, where we can still see ourselves, hold ourselves up in high enough regard.
I love the topic. There's a book that I came upon at some point about, it was kind of like the courage to be disliked. It was by some Asian guys that I was so excited about the message. I wanted to get them on the show, and their people said they just don't speak English. So it's probably going to be difficult. But that concept, same thing, Vienna. I mean, I just didn't know another language other than the one to be liked. Okay. You guys hit on some of the core issues that I wanted to dive into, but one, I mean, Britt, you talking about that. I mean, we're kids, and at some point we want to, at a young age, I want to do it myself. I'm going to bring up the word agency a few times, that because that's a core one. As I thought about this, a takeaway for myself is I want agency. I like that better than control, but I want some agency. I love getting up in the morning and I get to choose what I want to do. But two questions for you guys that I'm just curious about. That one, I do feel like our generation really was pandering after go out and do my own thing. And we have this culture now. Some of them are my kids, and they're not as motivated to go out and do their own thing. I'm curious your thoughts, if you have any, on why, and that regardless, we as in our youth, we come out, we inherently as humans, we do want control. We do want responsibility and autonomy, and we go into the world, and yet we then also often gravitate into this victim mindset where it's almost like we regress. in that. And it seems to be just humanity. That's what some of the things I want to hit here is these propensities. We talk responsibility, and yet we all seem to culturally fall away from it. So anywhere you want to jump in, but even the one now where I'm curious, we're in a culture that seems less responsibility oriented than ever. Kids not wanting to go. I don't know why. Thoughts?
Well, let's look at the culture. Could we start
Okay.
with just looking at the culture? How much the culture has changed in the last 30, 40, 50 years. Such a litigious society. Everyone suing everyone. If I can blame you, if me slipping in your parking lot can be your fault and I can make 25 grand, 50 grand on it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's not a few people, right? That's a lot of people, right? And that's a mindset that if you were in the 50s would be a shameful mindset. It would be embarrassing to be like, I'm going to pretend I got hurt so I could make money dishonestly. Like, it wouldn't be a thing. So I feel like in one respect, the society itself has changed, and not all bad, but it's just different. We're so connected now, 24/7 news cycle. There's no time to think. We don't have the same nuclear experiences, family wise and community wise, because everything is very. First of all, I mean, my kids. I got 7 grandkids and 3 kids, and they live in different countries. Like, they live all over the world, basically. So my family is a perfect example of sort of, in a way, there's a dissipation, or it's not a disillusion. Like, it's not like we're not close. It's just that we're not physically close. So it used to be in the 50s, 40s, 30s, even 60s, a lot of families were, you didn't have this ability to travel in the same way that we do now. Anyway, long way around the barn. Getting back to the lack of responsibility in some ways societally. If you look at what was happening during World War I or World War II, societally, everyone was expected to have skin in the game. Like, regular citizens were like not wearing nylons because they were being used to make some bombs that we needed, or whatever it is. Everyone was doing their part and actually cared. And we don't have that now. We have wars going on endlessly, 25-year wars that no one gives a shit about, like, at all. Like, there's nothing, no one's invested. And I don't mean no one, but there's not a national feeling about it. Just the division that we experience, at least in the U.S. So I don't know if that made any point at all. I went far away from where I was going, but you got the point.
That's funny. I'll take a different thread going to the, why aren't kids motivated? And I can't answer that question. But what I can say is, if we think of human brains as always being motivated, we're always motivated unto something.
Mm-hmm.
You're either motivated by ambition and goals and choice, but some people are motivated by comfort and security and staying small and safe. Sometimes too much comfort is going to be incredibly prohibitive to taking responsibility. I know for me, I can't speak for the kids today, but I did not take responsibility until I was in an environment that was so uncomfortable because people stopped enabling me that, I don't think all change requires a huge degree of pain, but there is a degree to which our brains are wired for patterns and predictions. If I know my comfort, my food, my rent are all going to get paid, even if I don't do anything, then on a very biological evolutionary level, why would I?
Right.
So I do think some of the dilemma is not lack of motivation, but what's the motivation? And then this idea that if the goal is to keep people as comfortable as humanly possible, then of course they're not going to want to go out and do what Terry did. Like, I wouldn't have gone out with $200 and discovered the joy of adulting if I was continuously kept in a, and I was for way too long. And then when I was uncomfortable enough, that's when the window of change then opened up. So just another track.
I'll take a third thread, which is, if agency also requires us to take responsibility, I think, one, that's confronting for a lot of people, but we also have to look at what responsibility looks like today. And I think that piece can be a little bit different when you look at maybe how we would all describe responsibility versus what, again, culturally might look like upholding responsibility. Right? Terry had mentioned, like 24/7 news cycle, 24/7, like your world, your life is out there and people are watching in a way that is really different than how any of us grew up. And I know that I can imagine that all of us probably have said a time or two before, thank goodness we didn't have social media when we were growing up. And I think about, again, the way that we might define responsibility here in this conversation is probably different than how it is experienced by a lot of people, where they say, okay, but if being responsible means that someone's going to cancel me, or there's absolutely no grace, or there's no second chance, or you can't be a human, or at 12 years old, something from your past is going to resurface and you're done for, right? Like those things are really terrifying and scary to a lot of people. And so I think that's one of the pieces that stands out to me when we think about like why it is so hard for someone to take agency in their own life, is because we look and we see what quote unquote responsibility looks like for all of these other people who are being, in some ways, right, like it's not an upholding, right? There is, I don't know, apparently today I love the word annihilation, but right, like it kind of, right, it's like people get annihilated, right? Like there isn't room to make mistakes. There isn't a lot of room to take responsibility and still be seen as a valuable, worthy, good human being, right? When there is such a commitment to stripping a person down and letting one moment or however many moments be all defining of them, right? That is something that is frightening for someone then to say, I want to take responsibility in my life. It's so much easier to just sit back and do nothing and take no agency because that is a safe place to exist, right? Like that, no one's going to come for you if you're not doing anything.
It's such a great point about what I took away from what you were saying, is the self-consciousness that is coming from this highly visible life that everyone is living. And it's interesting having lots of clients who are highly visible, like famous people in my life and in my career. It used to be 20 years ago, the only people who were having this experience were actually famous people, right? With all eyes on them in a totally different way. And then I could see it in my therapy practice, the self-consciousness that famous people feel living in a fishbowl. You literally can't go anywhere without wondering if people are looking at you. And if they're not looking at you, why aren't they looking at you? Are you not that famous? Like there's so much machination that goes along with fame. And it's a specific psychological experience.
Right.
But what you're saying, V, is so true about now anybody can get canceled in that same way that it used to only be for famous people. Now, right, you can be canceled in your, right, because it's so local. You could be canceled in your school. You could be from gossip, you could be online bullied or whatever. Somebody could send a picture. All of those things. You know, if each and every one of us here, and all of you watching and listening, if you're of a certain age where you didn't have social media when you were growing up, can you imagine? Like the mistakes, the bad decisions, I won't even name any of them because they're all awful. But if people knew them, someone was like filming me doing those terrible things that I did in my life. How do you come back from that? So I know what you're saying, because it is the lack of self-consciousness. And maybe it's also youthful ignorance without that visibility piece where you just, you take risks in a different way. That if we look at famous people coming up, ones who were teenagers and then actually make it to adulthood, you know, why there's so few who make it there without some massive scandal or losing their minds completely, is because this level of scrutiny and cancel culture is so toxic and makes you so paranoid to like just live.
You guys have all three said things that keep bringing me back to, I had written it down, survival versus, choosing. I think Terry, you said that. And then you, Britt, talking about comfort. And then Vienna, what you just talked about, that that resonates with me. I mean, I love finding the root cause, going back to health and wellness. I see my buddy, Dr. Randy James, in the chat over here. He's a functional medicine doc, and he's looking for the root issues. And that's what my care is with this issue of responsibility. Of course, we would all say we want it. Why are we as a culture? Seems like we're falling further and further away. And Britt, really, you've just got me thinking about comfort. And I feel like everything we're saying, I'm thinking comfort, security. And as we have more, we're probably willing to jeopardize it less. And so why take responsibility as what you were just talking about, that if we step out, we're liable to get shot at a bit, and how much things are just easier overall for most of us. And I say that with sensitivity and compassion for somebody listening right now who does not feel like they are in a safe and secure spot. But as a culture, we seem to be. I look at my kids, and yeah, they've got more. They've even got more entertainment. They're never bored, So we were all, Terry, to what you said, man, I couldn't wait to get out. That's just to do what I wanted to do. And home was boring and I want to go. They don't have that these days. They've got the devices. They've got constant entertainment. We all do. And so to look at responsibility, again, brings us back to what is the payoff. And I would say, okay, so let's go the other side then, because we're talking about the payoffs. The other side is, okay, if you're not, well, how would I ask it? Almost like, you guys are sitting with people every day and they're telling you the woes, if I can say that and it be compassionate, but telling, the things that they're struggling with. And you're hearing probably some victimhood and some, some blame that they're giving, some power that they're giving elsewhere. Well, maybe I'm stating that because I'm wanting to ask, what are those telltale signs of, if you are not adequately taking responsibility, having agency in your life, you'll see it through these threads. What bubbles up first for you guys?
You have to have a strong sense of self always. And what does it mean, right? Like to know yourself better than you allow yourself to believe that others know you, right? What happens is when someone else's narrative comes in about you that says you're a bad person, and then all of a sudden you internalize that as truth. Or, okay, you did this thing, and so now that means that you are undeserving of XYZ, the relationship, to succeed in life, to get the job, whatever it might be, right? It's like when that takes over your own storyline about yourself, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And again, when we don't have to make this conversation, only about social media, of course, but when you think, people will say like, oh, the trolls or the people who come in with a negative comment, and all of a sudden, like they've said something about a post you've made or not made. And then all of a sudden, that's the storyline that's like, that must be true about me. What is true about you has to be defined by you. And I don't mean that in a rigid way, meaning I don't want anybody to tell me things about myself or offer things that I ought to be looking at or reflecting on, right? So I don't mean that in a rigid way. So let's be in the nuance of this. But I need to know myself well enough so that when other people's storylines about me come in, they don't rip me down and make it impossible for me to hold myself again in high enough regard so that I can take responsibility for something. That's the thing that I see play out so much, is that when we can like ourselves enough, and in that is the beauty of being able to say, oh, I need to look at this area of my life because I've been judgmental of someone, or, oh, like I was gossiping about someone, and what's that all about, right? Yes, we want to do those things, but if I can hold myself up in high enough regard, and then someone says, hey, you did this thing that hurt my feelings, or hey, I feel like you missed the boat when you made that comment, then I can actually look at that, explore it, without needing to protect myself. Because the moment that I have to protect myself as the priority, I lose the thread. I become defensive. I point the finger at you and I say, well, here's what you did too, or you did this last week, or what about that thing that you, right? It becomes a distraction away from the thing that needs our attention. And so when I can hold myself up, when I like myself enough, when I know who I am at my core, even though maybe there is a behavior that's played out here, then I can become relationally protective instead of self-protective, or I can sort of hold the system, right, instead of just needing to hold myself, if that makes sense.
It does. I do want to jump in and ask a question. And I'm getting a bunch of incredible questions from the chat that I'll bring in. What you said though, to me is I feel like it's a consistent stumbling block, knowing who I am. Okay. So I'm going to say, do I know who I am? I'm going to ask you guys to give that a little defining, because who I am as a person, being comfortable with me, being okay with me is one thing. Now over here, to say who I am, because I can come over and say, guys, I am a peaceful, life-giving person. And you can say, well, gosh, my experience of you, you're the greatest energy vampire and toxic person I've ever met. So I can sit over here in my, I know who I am, and repel everybody with, not knowing who I am. And I see that. So do I trust my narrative? Do I trust the narrative of others? That feels like a balance that I see people continue to struggle with. Insight?
There's going to be proof in your life.
Okay.
Right. So here's the thing. You're the common denominator in your relationships. And if over and over again, your peace-loving, life-giving self is being ditched by people because you're actually an energy vampire and toxic, that is unavoidable. Like I always say to my clients, like, what is the repetition? What are we seeing over and over again? This keeps coming back. It's an invitation to look and go, the last 5 jobs I've had, these things happened. All those people are idiots. It can't be all those people. It can literally only be you, because you are the only common denominator. So I think that to really speak to the knowing yourself. Yeah. Like what my own take on that. I don't like when people talk about authentic self. It's like a pet peeve, because it sounds like we have like a core that's like already fully established and amazing. And if we would just peel back the layers of the onions of our dysfunction, we would just be like, pop out as like our most amazing authentic self. I don't think that's how it is. I think we have choices to make. I think we have decisions to make. I think we're going to stumble. We're going to make wrong decisions and then go, you know what? That was out of integrity for me. I will not do that again. I can count on myself to learn from my mistakes. I don't expect myself to be perfect, but we have to make conscious decisions daily about who we will be in this world. So no amount of peeling back onions, according to me, or layers of your bullshit or dysfunction is going to reveal something. This is a muscle. There is work to be done for who we want to be. And I think that we have to make decisions. Am I a person? I know who I am, right? I'm a person who keeps my word. I say I'm going to do it. I'm going to fucking do it. That's it. You can count on me because I can count on me. I'll tell you the truth about the way I feel. You don't have to guess. I'm not going to be mad at you and be withdrawn in anger and act weird. I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm emotionally trustworthy as a person. Now, was I always that? Obviously, no. I was 18 once. I was 25 once, right? Those are all decisions that through many years of therapy, but also through choices, through hurting people, through making mistakes, through messing up. Do we learn? Are you on an evolutionary path to take responsibility? And this does bring it back to that. Is part of, for me, the evolution of self is in taking responsibility and wanting to be sovereign. I know who I am, even if you're mad at me, Kevin. I'm still who I am. Even if you think I'm a piece of crap, I'm not, right? What Vee said before, it really resonated with me. Your narrative of me at this point in my life will never be stronger than my own narrative, because I literally know who I am, actually. And it doesn't mean, as you said before, I don't make mistakes. Of course I do. I won't have to apologize. Of course I will. So that's my 2 cents. Britt, I feel like you have something to say.
Oh, I was just adjusting because I have a thing back here. But I was thinking about what you were saying, Terry. First of all, I'm like, yeah, Terry, I want to be Terry when I grow up. Vee, you said a word that I was the word nuance, which I think is so crucial to this entire personal responsibility conversation, because to do what Terry's talking about, which is, yes, that's what we all want. The biggest barrier to the self-inquiry necessary to get to who am I, what do I want, how do I want to go about it, is the fear that responsibility somehow means denying the reality of my injury. And so there needs to be space for taking blame off the table. Doesn't mean that we're not acknowledging the very real injuries that have happened to you. I think somewhere in this discussion, not ours, but just in the larger discussion about responsibility, it became equated with, well, whatever happened to you happened. Now get over it and own yourself and own your stuff and own your life. And there's nuance that's needed. Personal accountability can coexist very peacefully with grief, with loss, with acknowledging that I'm not a victim, but the things that happened to me, I was at one point victimized.
Yes.
And that's an important thing to be able to hold, being victimized. And I have a not short trauma history. I didn't want to be, first I was professional victim, and then I over-indexed all the way to the other side on I'm not a victim and what happened to me happened and I'm great, which was my way of bypassing all the feelings. But responsibility in no way means you don't get to have feelings about what happened to you or honor the very real thing that victimized you in that moment. You can be victimized without being, quote, a victim. You can own what happened without blame. And I think to do all this awesome stuff, that starting with the definition, personal responsibility doesn't mean that. It means exactly what Terry said.
Let me pull out a question. This is from Marianne. It says, it sounds like we're talking about a distinction between taking responsibility for yourself versus taking responsibility for what belongs to someone else. For example, taking responsibility for someone else's disappointment or anger and thinking it's your responsibility to eliminate that. Thanks for that. Take that and to go, okay, so it's not my responsibility how you feel, how you choose to react to that. Though if I care about you, I may care about my role, that I can be curious at least. Okay, I upset you. Tell me why. It's not my responsibility that if you're wigging out, but I do care. And somebody else said they just jumped on the common denominator. What is the fruit of your life? Looking at that and being honest with that. But that aspect, that feels like a good one to hone in on of, okay, I'm not responsible for your feeling, which is, I failed at this horrifically. I was responsible for everybody's feelings until I burnt out like a big meteor. And, but if I do care, because I probably, Britt, tend to polarize and go, okay, then I'm going to go over here and your deal is your deal. Okay, well, I might have been an ass. And so let me be curious to see how you perceived me. And if I want to take some responsibility for that, fair?
Yes, but
To
what I feel like
understand,
Marianne is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go.
I was just going to say, to understand your participation in it, right? Because if we are relational beings, right, we are participating in something. And I think it's one of those things, right? People will often exist in the rigidity of this, right? Is either, yes, like you said, I am either taking full responsibility or I'm like totally out. I'm not responsible for you. You're not responsible for me. And again, we're bringing our nuance word back into the conversation. I'm a big believer that when we choose to be in relationship with someone, right, whether that's partnership or a dear friend, right, part of that, and it's probably an unspoken agreement, but you're saying it, Kevin, right? I care about you, right? If we are in relationship together, there is a care, there is a concern, there is a commitment to understanding this dance that we are in. And so, sure, I'm not responsible for what you do with your emotion and what's happening over there, but I also have to make space to say, I'm participating in this dance with you. And there might have been something that I said or did that crossed a boundary, that was hurtful, that lacked some mindfulness. And I think you we're already describing it well, is how do we become curious in this space? So instead of placing blame or avoiding responsibility entirely, how do we become curious and say, okay, how did we participate together, right? What's the dance here, right? What's actually showing up to the table? We know when there's reactivity, that there's like historical stuff that's playing out too. And it's not that every moment in a relationship needs to become a therapy session, but we do know that like that when something is playing out and we're bringing it forward and we're like, I didn't like that, or, hey, like you need to check the way that you use your language, or yeah, you were an asshole, the way that you brought that forward, right? Like those are things that we do want to unpack to some degree. Again, it doesn't need to become a full-blown therapy session in every relationship and in every little rupture, but we do want to become curious about that. And when access to curiosity, though, means that we can hold ourselves up high enough in regard to go there, right? It kind of comes back to what I've been saying, is that in order to become curious, in order to understand the context of your life, right? In order to know what it was like for you to grow up in a family system and what my family system was like, right? In order to access those things, I have to be able to put down shame and embarrassment and guilt so that I can access curiosity in this moment. And when I access curiosity in this moment, it opens the door instead of closing it. Because if we hang out in the other space, the door is closed, disconnection, avoidance, resentment, etc., starts to build.
Yes.
There's I'm going to pull out a couple of the responses here. Ashley said, who all do we know? I think she was coming in when we were talking about authenticity. Who all do we know who is emotionally trustworthy as a person? I think we crave that authenticity. Does that float from an authenticity standpoint? Because I struggle with that a lot. I just want to be the authentic me, meaning I want to be an unmodified jerk and I want you to like me anyways. And I may love you unconditionally, but no, I don't like your behavior. I don't want that kind of authenticity. But emotionally trustworthy, that resonates with me in that. Is that a good groundwork for authenticity?
I'm going to say, yeah. But the thing is, what V was just saying about being emotionally responsible, being emotionally trustworthy, requires our ability to be curious, to look in, to become the observer of ourselves, our behaviors, our interactions without judgment, and a willingness. And also, what I was going to say, or what I was thinking when you were talking before about it, is that there is a necessity. We must be vulnerable to be curious, right? Because in that curiosity, we may discover things that make us go, ooh, about ourselves, our own behavior, right? So there's got to be that pliability or that durability of self, that sense of self in the center. When we think about having good self-worth or good self-esteem, the way that I look at it is that we feel like, you know what, whatever life throws at me, like I'll be okay. Not that I want bad things to happen, but there's a sense that like I'll be okay. Like I can sort of stand on my own 2 feet even in rough times. So anyway, not to go away from what you were talking about, Kevin, but I feel like the emotional. Go ahead.
I love it. I kind of want to go there because you guys have mentioned, when you said holding ourselves in high regard, you just mentioned self-worth, self-esteem. And that's a great, as we look at responsibility, can you adequately take responsibility, or maybe the level to which you can will be equal to your self-esteem, your personal identity? Because when I go back and look at my own struggles, I would say maybe they're completely bound with my identity, even onto the fact of my story is somewhat of trying to take too much responsibility. That was my Superman cape and my God complex. Yes, I am responsible for everything because I actually am God. And that worked until we proved that I am not. But I was trying to feed my identity. I was trying to feed that void of going, please affirm that I am perfect. Please affirm that I am ever strong. Please affirm that. And it was, There you go.
It's avoiding responsibility. It is a
Yeah.
form, right? We talk about take responsibility as if it's only own all your crap and only like be willing to say everything bad that you're about and change it. But sometimes taking responsibility means like no one can hold you accountable. Like the idea of accountability like grinds me the way authentic self does to Terry. It's like at the end of the day, it's like we come into the world and we come out of the world solo. You cannot outsource accountability. And sometimes that means taking responsibility for being emotionally trustworthy within. Like attachment is all super buzzy and like so trendy, but no one talks about attachment is an inside job too. Like it can't just be I'm building secure attachments to emotionally trustworthy people. That's
Correct.
a good goal, but the initial attachment as an adult is between you and your mind and you and your heart, and that starts with, are you willing to take responsibility for your insides? That ultimately, even the most loving, kind, nurturing, compassionate relationships, the biggest income, the most awesome career isn't going to ring that bell of those quiet places inside you that need you to say, yep, you're my responsibility too.
Can I rephrase that? Yeah. You've got an amen
So good.
from Vienna. We need digital amens here. Am I hearing you say that? So the concept of trying to be over responsible, say the God complex Superman, was a way to avoid accountability. Yes, you are. Responsibility, taking it for the external, for everybody out here and everything out here. That's what I did. And I mean, I'll be candid because I was blind to I am on the spectrum still of my blindness to myself and the internal. So that's a way of not being responsible. That checks out.
And what is it really in those behaviors? I would say it's high functioning codependency, right? We are codependently relating
I resemble
to
that
the people. Yeah, you do. Correct.
Thank you.
But what does that look like?
I feel affirmed.
Being codependently attached means being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, the relationships, what other people are doing is all you just inserting yourself in there in the middle of the solution for all their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about that, and this brings me back to Marianne's comment, because to a degree, the first thing, of course, listen, I just wrote a book on high functioning codependency that comes out in October. So obviously I have it on my brain, but that's the first thing I thought about with Marianne's comment about how do we not take responsibility. Like, think about it. You're out to dinner. You pick a restaurant. You're out to dinner with your partner and they don't like the food. Do you feel like defensive a little bit? Like you want to defend the restaurant? Like, well, I read a good review. It seemed like it was good. I don't know. Like, what am I, the chef? Like, it's not necessary, but that's also taking over responsibility. So Kevin, what you were talking about, and I obviously agree, if we're taking over responsibility for other people's stuff, which the way that I would describe it is, instead of you just knowing what is your side of the street, you felt obligated to clean the whole damn neighborhood.
I did, because I wanted the glory from that too. It was feeding my baggage, feeding my lack of, back to where you guys, self-worth, self-esteem, and my own identity wounds. I guess I'm going to pull out one and take advantage of my role here as the host, because this is from my daughter, Autumn, one of my daughters. She asks, I'm curious how privilege and power play into one's ability to know oneself rather than be swayed by others' perspectives about who they are. It seems like self-empowerment is needed to take responsibility for your life. It reminds me of a quote by Dr. Wade Nobles. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. She's studying your guys' line of work, just so you know.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that? Privilege and power, how do they play into the ability to know oneself?
Well, choice is really what we're talking about. And to the degree that you have choices, that is the measure of all the things we're talking about. You can't build a self-led, self-designed life in the absence of choices. So if you're living in a conflict zone, if you are living under oppression where your choice power is reduced, or as we would say, annihilated, that becomes more of a systemic conversation. And now we are well outside the realm of personal responsibility. And we're talking about things like privilege and like systemic failures and access to resources. But it's to the degree that you have those choices, that's the only degree to which you can be expected to then make them. If you don't have them, that's a whole different ballgame altogether, in my opinion.
Thanks.
Well said.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think what I would say, we've with power comes great responsibility. And this kind of pulls back to what Britt was saying before, which is that you need to be in right relationship with the self. Because if you're just somebody who is dominant out in the world and is like, this is the story about me, this is the story about me, this is the story about me, I don't care what anybody else has to say, you're going to adopt the story of me, right? That's not what we're talking about. And I think that is seen through eventually. And maybe more importantly, it is felt internally, no matter what. Because if you're BSing yourself, you're BSing yourself, right? Like ultimately, that is what is true. And so, sure, if we are utilizing power in that way to conduct the narrative that we want everybody else to hold about us, et cetera, and maybe we're quite charming and maybe we're really intentional with it and we're quite convincing and we do get people to adhere to that. Again, you're not going to be in right relationship with yourself, and that integrity piece that lives within, which is what Britt was saying before about like you have to be emotionally, what was the terminology we were using before? Emotionally responsible,
trustworthy.
Trustworthy. Right.
Yeah.
If you're not emotionally trustworthy with yourself, you know. And listen, the reality of it is a lot of people, other people know too, and you will see through it. But if you know, then it's all broken anyway.
Right. Totally. I want to say something about the power and privilege, though, speaking to the question, that if we're looking at it from like a socioeconomic point of view, let's say that if you're raised in power and privilege, and then not just from being in the majority culture type of thing, not just that. I mean, actual power and privilege. The question is, do you have opportunities to figure out who you are? And that has everything to do with the way that you're parented. So some family systems, the parents cannot let it go. They don't understand that your kid gets to a certain point, your job, if we look at the Prophet, that beautiful poem in the Prophet on children, and it basically talks about parents, you are the bow. The kids are the arrow. Your job is to be sturdy and strong and to let them go far. But a lot of parents stay where they are inserting themselves into the center of that adult child's life still. They still have an expectation. Every Christmas, you're still coming home to our house. Rather than encouraging like, hey, make your own family system. We're your family of origin. This family you're creating is now your first family, which is what I said to my 3 sons when they were getting older, because I want them to build their own lives. So I think that with your authentic self, sort of trying to bring it back to the question, we need to have experiences to know who we are. We need to take risks to know who we are. We need to make mistakes to choose who we're going to be. And I think that if you live a very protected life, everything is handed to you on a platter. I mean, obviously, parents who are doing that are not doing you a favor. They're just not. Because the favor is saying, I believe that you are solid, and that even if you make mistakes, I will let you experience the consequences of your choices, because I think you can. And I also think it's the only effing way you're going to learn. There's an actual story that Chris Rock talks about his daughter when she was in this very private, bougie high school, and her and her friends got in trouble. And she was like, you're not going to expel me. Like, I'm basically Chris Rock's daughter. Like, never. So there was going to be a slap on the wrist. And Chris Rock drove to the school, did not tell his wife, and said to the dean, you need to expel her today. Like, you need to. And Not till years later, she got expelled. She was bawling her eyes out. Oh my God. But he was like, I can't raise this kind of kid who thinks that they're above the rules. You're not. And I didn't do you any favors. The fact that you think this. And anyway, she ended up having to apply to, it was her senior year, had to apply to different schools. She went to a different school. She's very successful now. I actually think she's a lawyer, but I loved that story because he was like, there's got to be consequences for your actions. And knowing that if we don't allow children to experience those, even teenage kids, even young 20 kids, what happens to them and the way that they look at the world and their place in it.
That's one that I learned, Terry. I just explained, some of my own, I needed to fill my identity by fixing things. And it wasn't until one of my other daughters said, she was explaining something. And she said, Dad, stop, don't go fix it. I will never learn to do it myself. And it was my backing away that I learned, oh my gosh, the amount of energy I can save and I don't need to. And when I don't jump up, they go and take care of it. And it was a big learning. My daughter Autumn, who's listening here, apparently she knows well my journey through that as she has younger siblings, though I do want to retract the statement about not coming home for the holidays. I'm not on board with that. Autumn, I want you there. No, I am. But that was hard. That was hard. That was a hard one. So I'm here to have my toes stepped on. So that's going back to this privilege and power. I do want to dive in to just control. And one of you said, and we had some responses. I don't know if I can go find them again, but some responses of people going, yes, that concept. I don't know if you said it, Britt, but of we are victimized. We are victimized. Somebody listening, if not all of us, were victimized by COVID and it reduced our income, or we lost a job, or we lost access to people, or whatever it was. We were victimized by that. Different than going forward as a victim. But just that, in that concept of taking responsibility, it does. I mean, I do inherently want control. And so that, if, let's go back to agency. And yet I'm also, as I mature, realizing I have less and less and less control over what I thought I did before. I have less certainty. I have less control. So I'm in one hand holding that. I really have less control, but I want control. There are things happening. There's less that I can influence out there. I realize that today. So it's not taking control, but I want to be in control, bridge that gap somewhat, because we're talking about responsibility, and it's not going where I did. Okay, I'm going to control everything and burnout. I wonder how many people achieve, hit burnout, and that's where it came from. And so to me, it feels like I was going to say a balance, or would you look at it as a tension?
I look at it as discernment. I don't think it's either. I think you have to be discerning. It's very much like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity, right? To control the thing, change the things I can change and accept the shit I can't. Like really getting that there are things that are not for you. And how about the things that are for you, that you really in earnest grab a hold of those? What you think, how you feel, how you live, how you relate, what you add to the world, what kind of a citizen you are, what kind of a global citizen you are, the things you give a shit about, where you put your money, do you vote? Do you know what I mean? Like, there is a lot that we can do if we're looking at, as a world citizen type thing. But there's also so many things that we cannot control, and being discerning about what they are requires a certain level of surrender that I think can be very difficult for anyone. But in a way, I almost think if we were doing it from a stereotypical point of view, might even be more difficult for men identified sort of as alpha males than even for women. I find it incredibly hard, but I've worked on it for years to surrender to what is. Right? It's not like throw in the white flag. It's surrender to the truth of what is.
I think one of the best questions that we can ask around control is that in my attempt to control, what is it that I'm trying to protect for myself or for others, but ultimately for myself? And I think it's important for everyone to sit with that question in the moments where the attempt for control presents. You writing that one down, Kevin?
I am. Can you? I am, because I've become really. You said your word was annihilated. Mine is enamored. I'm enamored with everything, and lately I've been thinking about threat. Like, what is the threat? Why am I here feeling my hackles are up, or something's going on? And as I get more understanding of my inner world, you go, why? What am I? What? I'm not going to get eaten by a lion. That person's not going to stab me. What am I threatened by? So your aspect of looking at it and going, what am I trying to protect? I can align with that. Why am I feeling threatened? Because so often I'll look at it and go, I'm still trying to learn that, but sometimes at least I'm aware of the fact that I'm feeling a threat, and it doesn't really seem to make sense. And I can at least address it from that level. But what am I trying to protect? It helps.
I know that Britt is going to pounce on this one, because if you say tiger or bear, just enter Britt Frank into the chat room, and she's going to break it down for you and for us as to why. But I think especially what you just said of like, it doesn't make sense to me. Great. It's not going to make sense to you. It's not going to be this intelligent sort of answer because you're a smart guy. I've got the answer here, right? That this is something that is historical, as we've said before, that's going to make, when we can connect to that, right, it's going to make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And again, brittle jump to that. But I'll share a quick example here of my own life. It was before I was married. I was dating Connor at the time, and we're having a fight, and I have no clue what the fight is about, but I do know that I am doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down. Some people have probably heard this story before. And I need to be right. I need to be right. I need to win. I need to prove my point. And that is the most important thing that can happen out of this conflict. And bless him, he's like, I got it. Like, I understand. He's like, yeah, I heard you. I'm here. Yeah, it's tracking. And I keep going and going and going. And then shame starts to happen. I'm like, I can't stop. I have an out of body moment. Shame starts to spiral in. Replace the shame with curiosity. Okay, what is my need to be right? Right? Because I'm controlling this. I'm trying to control what's happening here, right? So what is my need to be right? What is my need to prove my point serving? What is it protecting me from? And if we don't have to travel that far to look at it, I grew up with a father who was very manipulative, gaslighter, psychologically abusive, not towards me, but towards my mother, over and over and over again. She was not good at tracking it. It was crazy making for her, a lot of paranoia. And I was the human in that system who was tracking it. And I coded that being right was safe and not being right was unsafe. Period. That's it. I want to be more like this and less like that, because I see what happens when you're like that, right? When you can't prove your point. He was so masterful at proving his point, no matter how many jumps and cartwheels he did, right? He would get there. And that's why I asked that question again, right? When we come back to this attempt at control is trying to protect you from what? Because when I have that context, I have so much more compassion for myself. Now, it doesn't mean continue to behave this way. That's where I have to take responsibility and ownership, right? I cannot operate in the world that way. I can't operate in my marriage that way and believe it's going to be a successful one. But I can have compassion for this part that wants to go into this controlling space in these moments when I'm scared, where I might be feeling insecure, and work with it that way. So I just wanted to give an example that might highlight a little bit of that for folks. But Bray, you want to break down the lion in the room?
The lion, well, I won't go into all of the things because we don't need to, but I'm like, I know what this is. I have the answer. All my like I want to be the smart one in class is like, raise your hand, because brain. Thank you, V. You're healing all these years of childhood trauma right here. Because brain, I always start at this point now, knowing what I know about lions and the evolutionary brain, like your brain is a lot smarter than your conscious mind because it's been keeping you alive and humans alive long enough and it hasn't been updated. Like imagine using a cell phone that hasn't been updated. Like our cell phones update every hour. Our brains are still the same. So sometimes it's enough in a moment to just say, I don't know why I'm reacting like this because brain. Okay, great. That still doesn't solve the problem. Now you're just insightfully feeling like crap. So I like the question. I like these thing about what are you protecting?
Mhm.
I also like holding the question, what's my, and this goes back to Terry's comment about codependency. What's my role here? And I know for any therapist, it's really easy for us to want to get to an outcome or want to help make a thing happen, but that's not our role. And whether it's a parent relationship, a professional relationship, a sibling, friends, a work relationship, whatever, if you can ask the question, what's my role here? Likely you're going to very quickly come down to my role is not to fix it, solve it, or save this person. My role might be just to be a safe landing spot. My role is certainly never going to be to hold someone accountable because I can be supportive, I can contribute, but I can't make somebody do anything. And that goes back to this relationship with uncertainty. Like, what am I protecting? What am I trying to control? That will switch into what's my role. What's my role will get you to a menu of options for, okay, now if this is my role here, what are my choices? And then of those, what am I willing to do? Because if I'm not willing to make any choices, if I'm not willing to identify my role, and if I'm not willing to get curious, then the stuck, spinny, I keep doing the same thing and getting the same result is going to continue. So I like identifying role as part of how to take responsibility.
Yes.
I do too. And back to that, the statement that was made about, being what can we be responsible for? What are we not out here? And as you're talking about control, the word influence just came up. I mean, so internally, I've been reading about, the locus of control. I have control of me. I have control of obviously what I do and how I act, but I have control of me out here. Question, what can I really control? And I've been playing with the word influence. There are things I want to influence. I want to influence right here, this audience. I want to influence I really like the topic of a brand because I had somebody one time, it was in a workshop that I was in, I was a participant, and somebody said what their brand was. And the guy leading it says, well, you can't say what your brand is. You can say how you're trying to influence it, but ultimately your audience will tell you what your brand is. You may say you're the best tennis shoe on planet Earth, but the results are going to come out here. That proof is going to be out there. The context, and we talked about that earlier, but even that seems more, it almost feels like a relief. Because I just can't control the things out there. But I don't want to just say I can only control me and just, give a hands up. I can't control that. But to look at my role in certain ways as a father, as a business owner, as a podcaster, as an author, as a whatever, as an influencer, an influencer. I do want to. Yeah. I mean, none of us are here. We're here because we want to. There's not little we can control. You can't control your patience, but you are striving to influence it. Vienna, I see you looking thoughtfully up in the corner. What?
Yeah, I mean, when you said we all want to, I'm just checking that. I'm not
Check
as you were.
Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were speaking. My question back to you is why do you want to influence? I don't know that I want to influence.
Oh, well, I'll give you gut reaction right away. One is my intellectual mind, which, oh my gosh, by the way, your statement, Brett, I wrote down. I mean, now I'm just insightfully feeling like crap. I love that. I'm going to use that. That's really funny. I should consider why that's so funny. But yeah, looking at why do I want to influence? I would say it inspires me. And I'm going to give you two answers. And right, first cuff, that it inspires me to want to influence people with things that I have found are life-giving, are constructive. I want to say, oh gosh, this, I think we all want to do that. It's a movie. You got to see this. It was so great because you felt something and you want to transfer that feeling, that influence. And I would tend to say, again, just being candid with it, that I got to imagine that there's things that I want to influence for my own comfort. I want it to be this way because I'm more comfortable in it. I want you to be, I want you guys all happy and inspired and engaged in this and not sitting here looking at your phone because it's part of my ego and what I am interested in. I want somebody else out here not angry because it makes me uncomfortable. I want to go out and have everybody at peace. So twofold, fair?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that divide is really an interesting one, right? The one that says, yeah, like I think that movie example is a fantastic one, right? Where I've had that experience before where I'm like, oh, like I just want everyone to see this so that you can feel the thing. And because it was so profound and powerful. That is for you, the other person. And then I think what you described, the latter part of what you described was more for you and less for maybe to some degree. Like I want people to have a nice experience, which sure, okay. But again, I mean, all three of us could take us down that route of, and why? What does that protect? And what does that serve for you? And what wound of yours, is present in making that statement, Terry?
And what do we miss? See, here's the thing with what he's saying. And your desire to influence is all about you, right? Your desire for people to have a specific thing is all about you. And what happens, because this is what high functioning codependency is all about, when we are like, I don't want you to marry that stupid idiot. I don't want this person to get fired from their job. So I'm going to lie about them being home sick with COVID when really they were just hungover or whatever the thing is. But what we miss, and this is the devastating part of needing to influence others in this way, is that we miss A, knowing them. Like, how about replace the ideas and thoughts and directions we'd like to give with deep inquiry? What do you think? Even with kids, even with teenagers, I was like, what does your gut say? What do you think you should do? That's the most important thing. Let's start there. I'll weigh in later. People always be like, but I want to know what you think. I'm like, before we even think about what I think, it's your life. What you think is way more important than what I think. And yet if it's someone younger or someone who I'm sort of mentoring, of course, I will give my 2 cents, but I talk extensively about this in the book and give all of these expansive questions that we can ask. Because here's the thing, I don't want to influence my therapy clients in a particular way. I want to help my therapy clients get whatever it is they want out of life. I had a client who was married to a dentist because like her dream was to be married to a doctor or a dentist. That was it. She friggin' hated this guy. Like, did I want that life for her? No, she didn't care though. She was like, but you know what? It's worth it because I got a black Amex and this is the life I want. And I have a huge house and I throw parties. And it was not for me to be like, I would like you to have a more authentic experience. Who am I? This is what she wanted. I was like, go you, I guess. Like, so, and withholding the judgment. So I think that what we're really talking about is really, again, going back to exactly what both of you had said, like, why do we want to influence? And I'm not denying, right? I'm literally, there's no way to deny that, especially with close relationships, the people I love, children, grandchildren, my sisters, like I am endlessly fighting my desire to overtly or covertly control, endlessly. Like I have the urge to do it. I'm too healthy to do it. I can't do it. I go, what do you think you should do? Well, it sucks. That's hard. I'm sorry to hear that. Even though I want to be like, oh my God, I have so many good ideas. You should do them. But I don't do that. Because the truth is we have to learn how to let the chips fall where they may when they're not our friggin' chips.
Mic drop, Terry. I really love that we're talking about this because it's true. As therapists, I have to self-check my desire to influence because that's about me protecting, like V said, I'm protecting an outcome and a perception, and I want to be seen as competent or whatever.
Totally.
But the more I can get out of the influencing space, that actually creates the container for someone to take personal responsibility.
Yes.
Because if I'm influencing, they don't get the win. And then I take credit for it. And so to really take yourself out of, I don't like the refrigerator magnet, I don't take credit for your wins or blame for your losses, requires me to
Yes.
take that influencer desiring part of me and like tell her, like, you need to go have a snack and chill out. We can't, that's human to want that, but that can't be the driver. If that's if the desire to influence is the driver, I would say go see Vienna, because she'll get out of you what you're protecting and what's really going on under there.
Agreed.
So good, right? Such a good like pull back to the personal responsibility piece, right? Is that like we jump in everybody else's lanes the moment that we try to do that, and that we then take away the opportunity for people to choose.
Yeah. And it's not very loving, by the way. Side note, we say we're obsessed with our people. We love them all so much. But when you really think about it, you know what is loving? Being with someone in a foxhole and being with their feelings. That shit is loving. Allowing someone to be falling apart and you being like, I'm here. I'll do anything. I'll just be with you. Rather than the moment we start auto-fixing and auto-advice giving, the other person disappears. We literally just kick them down the stairs and we're like, now it's all about me and my amazing answers. Can't wait to fix you. Nobody feels loved by that. And think about it. When people do it to you, I'm immediately pissed and will immediately be like, hey, I don't need that. I need you to give a shit that my feelings are hurt or that I'm upset or that I'm frustrated. Always with my husband, I'm like, you cannot understand why I feel this way. That's okay. You must care that I feel this way. And of course, obviously 27 years later, he does. But I feel like that's a very important distinction that we got to make.
Okay. I'm going to jump on that distinction. Because I did that. I love hitting these root things again, because one of my questions is I want to know how we miss it, how we think that we're taking responsibility and how we miss it. I love questions or topics like that because I've been victimized myself, with those of going, okay, I think I get it. And to realize, oh, I missed it. Because I feel like it's even more dangerous to think you got it when you don't. I mean, that's kind of the definition of a fool, right? When you think you got it and you don't, it's more dangerous than just knowing you don't got it. And so with this responsibility, what you just talked about, just to point it out, I realize now in retrospect I want to say as a father, but I did it everywhere. I did it as a business partner. I did it everywhere is I am going to take responsibility. I'm doing it out of concern and protecting myself. And that was difficult. I did it though, kind of the opposite. I think the opposite, and I want to root this out of what you just talked about, Terry. I did it with a lot of, I did it sweetly. Can I say that? To where my kids are going, God, Daddy's so sweet, but oh my gosh, just sit down and let us do, for the love of God. Yeah. And I did, and I may have let it come in and that may have let it go further because I wasn't irritating them. It was really sweet. And on some ways they might have been, gosh, that's great. It takes care of everything. And then found out, gosh, I am divesting them of the opportunity to grow and to learn. And meanwhile, I'm getting more and more bitter doing these things that nobody asked me to do.
No. So, and them not taking your advice, like you're like, I've got this grade A advice. When you're really bitter about other people not taking your advice, you're relating in a codependent way. Because so much of the time, like you said, it's advice. They may be complaining to you, but they may not have even asked you for anything. And you're like, I don't know why. You obviously don't want to fix this problem because I have the answer and I told you the answer. Why don't you just do the answer? Because it's not your life. And because we're all on our own path and because we can't do those things until we're ready. And just because you're ready for them to do it doesn't mean they're ready to do it. And I think that when we really bring it all back to what's the most loving action is to ask someone just the simplest thing, right? Between men and women, I would see this when I used to counsel couples, right? Women just want to be seen. Men just want to fix. This is it. Nobody. And yeah. Okay. So I would say, why don't you just say, how can I best support you right now, babe?
Yeah.
What would be helpful? Listen to me. Great. Don't make suggestions. Great. Let's have sex. Whatever. I mean, who knows? There could be lots of things that could be very supportive at that moment. But just the question rather than immediately trying to insert the answer, I think is really loving and helpful.
It's so good. And then sometimes the most loving thing to do is nothing. Even if they're begging, and I say this for myself, I'm like, somebody save me, fix me, do it for me. The most loving thing that someone told me was, no, you can do it yourself. Because in people's well-meaning, well-intentioned, whatever efforts to make me comfortable, they were disempowering me, because if someone's doing it for me, that teaches me I can't. That may not have been the intention, but my husband, who's very loving, will sometimes say, if I ask him, and he's very kind and generous, but occasionally he'll be like, no, you can do that. And I get stoic. My codependency just flares. I'm like, how dare you? If you loved me, you would fix the sink right now. And it's like, I know how to get under there and do the thing. Even if I'm asking for the help, if you were to say to me, how can I help you? And I'm like, do it for me. It's not loving to enable. Like, it wouldn't be loving for me to hand drugs to someone who's struggling with an addiction.
Correct.
Sometimes doing the thing, even if I can, even if I want to, even if they're asking me to, is profoundly unloving.
Cool.
That's hard. That's hard.
Pull up. When we talk about responsibility, when we labeled this topic here as, I wrote about it so often, of taking responsibility and not giving blame. And we started off talking about the culture, and it seems like we have a culture less prone to, maybe because of comfort, like you talked about, Britt, really resonates with me, less prone to maybe take responsibility. Blame is such a big part of this. And I wanted to play with this with you guys, because I feel like I find, as we talk about that and take blame and put it up as a bad thing, as a, giving away your power, that I feel like we tend to, okay, I'm not going to blame out here. And again, I'm talking about myself. I just blame me. All right. So I'm just going to blame me. I'm not seeing fruit from that either. And I'm wanting to just say, no, we can't blame anything in essence, but go down that rabbit hole, because that one is, talk about a toxic thing, and that we're seeing massively back to social media. It's the blame game. I mean, you look at the social media, you look at the headlines, that's what sells. Kind of back when it used to be, if it bleeds, it leads. Now it feels like if it blames, it leads. That's what we do. And we're awash in it, has to affect us.
But what Britt said, I think this brings us back to what Britt said about, because it's exactly what you just said, Kevin. We have real experiences. By naming those real experiences for what they are, that doesn't fall into some toxic, weird blaming place, right? If you were sexually abused or abused as a child, that shit happened to you. That happened. Now, the choice becomes, as we grow, will we let this be? Are we going to work out? Are we going to do trauma work on our original wounds? Are we going to have that experience be sort of beautifully woven into this unique tapestry that is our life? Or are we going to let it be the defining thing of our life? Right? So I feel like when we talk about blame, there seems to be this connotation that's like you said, Kevin, right? We don't want to blame anyone else. Then if we're automatically bouncing it back, as kids do in abusive situations, there's always this tendency to self-blame, right? Because if it's me, then it's less depressing than actually accepting how bad the situation is, right? If it's me, then I could be a better student, and maybe then the abuse will stop, or whatever it is. So I think that I'm not sure I said anything helpful other than just wanting to get clear about what you're talking about, Kevin.
I want to point at, somebody just put in the chat, Soma. She said, as far as accountability goes, my husband says I have a third leg that's always kicking my own ass. So back to the blame thing. I'm not going to blame. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to take accountability. That's a great one. That's been mentioned a couple of times in the chat. I'm going to take accountability. But if that just comes into kicking my own ass, I don't feel like we're progressing.
Wait, can I just say one more thing about that? That's a really great point. But the whole thing about self-blame, and then I'll let you go, Vay, is I said this once to actually my husband, who had a tendency to be like, have a lot of self-loathing, a lot of self-blame, a lot of like putting himself down. And I mean, obviously that shit gets tired. So this was early on in the relationship. But I said, this is the same. Someone who's like, I'm amazing, sucking up all the air in the room, bragging, is literally doing the same thing as someone who thinks they're a piece of shit. It's the same thing. So if you're endlessly talking about how it's you and you're just a loser and you're whatever it is, you're sucking up the same air in the same room, doing the same exact thing. So it's not okay to have at what Soma said, right? That third leg, that, the mea culpa, the it must be me thing. I feel like they're two extremes that hopefully what this conversation is going to lead us to, and what the work on this stuff leads us to, is being somewhere in the middle, being able to take responsibility. Like you were saying before, Kevin, think about, was I insensitive? You said I was. Let me think about that. Maybe I was. I'm sorry. Right? We can take responsibility without this, because I see it in my therapy clients too. There can be this reactive, like always taking the responsibility for things, always, especially trauma survivors can be this way, where it's like always feeling like if I had done something different, it would be different. But none of that is true, right? Because it can't never be you and it can't always be you. Anyway, Deanna, I interrupted you.
It's great.
I think that you could have been in a 90s boy band. I just want you to know that. Because you've done it a few times, and I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. It would have been your other calling.
Great. Great. Love it.
A commitment to self-blame is also a commitment to stuckness. You can't move anywhere, right? Like it's just, and same whether you're blaming yourself or you're blaming everybody else all the time, right? Either one is what it winds up being, a commitment to staying stuck. There is no movement that can happen in that place. And we've talked about curiosity before. And I think when we are willing to be in that sort of that space with the compassion piece and the accountability ownership piece, right? It allows us to enter into curiosity again, right? We have to be able to enter into curiosity in this place, because otherwise the alternative is that we do stay stuck. We cannot move anywhere. And I don't know that I have much more to say on that specifically, but I just wanted to say, like, a commitment to self-blame or other blame is a commitment to stuckness.
Amen. Then the blame thing,
Seriously.
if we're talking about blame and differentiating blame from just owning what happened, blame is an explanation. Blame has like an implication sort of involved. This happened, which is why this happened. This happened, so it must be because you did that. So blame is not observing this horrible thing happened, period. Now, like Terry said, what are my choices? Blame is an explanation, and we don't want to be trying to explain away. And as soon as we start adding stories to our symptoms or to our whatever our dilemma is, then we do get into a place where curiosity is annihilated, because you cannot be in a state where you're like in defensive explaining and being open to possibility at the same time. Like those two states cannot exist simultaneously. So curiosity requires us to abandon all of the explanations, all of the stories, all of the if this then that, and just go, okay, what now? What next? What's here?
It
so good.
That hits what resonates well. I have found myself recently kind of tuned into the word because, that it's often dangerous, because that's when we're explaining. That's when we are, honestly, the bigger word that I'm struggling with at this point is justification. And even thinking about it as an exercise, can I just state what I did, or state, as you said, observe, not evaluate, not judge. Can I just state it, own it, and not justify it? And I realized how difficult it is, or even just how habitual it is. Even if I realize, okay, it's not that difficult, but it's a habit. It's a justification. And I want to offload some of the responsibility on me. And that's why I justify, that's why I explain. And it feels like a great exercise to go through the day, state whatever you did, no justification, no explanation. If somebody asks and you feel like they're doing it out of curiosity, maybe you will offer that. But the beholden to that, back to what did we say? The emotional Safety,
Trustworthiness.
trustworthiness. If it is somebody who we feel is authentically curious, or is it somebody waiting, because this is often the case, or that you hear people who are upset about it or feeling victimized, that they share that and it's used solely to come back and invalidate or continue the argument. And so thank you for pointing out the explaining. That resonates.
What you said, though, you're talking about the difference between providing context and convincing someone.
Perfect. Yes. Convincing is another one. Yes. Context, if it's authentically desired. Fair?
Yes, and here's the thing. Not everyone deserves your context.
Yeah.
Right? The people in my life who I love, if I can't go to my friend's open mic thing that I know is important to her that I normally would, I tell her why. I have an early meeting at 7 a.m. I can't, or I would be there. And maybe I send her flowers before she goes on. Maybe I'm not convincing her I have a right to choose to stay home because I have a 7 a.m. meeting. I know I have a right to do that. I'm providing context because I love her and I want her to know that if I didn't have a 7 a.m. meeting, I would be there and that I'm there in spirit. So I think we have to really look at where are we providing context and with whom, and where are we just convincing, which is exactly what you said, Kevin, justifying our actions. I want you to approve of me. I want you to think I did the right thing. I think I did the right thing. And I want to make sure you approve. It's all this validation seeking.
That may be the answer. One of the questions that was just put, it's the most recent one. It says, how can we be curious without getting to a reason? And maybe that's it. Context instead of convincing.
It depends on what you're being curious about, though, is my 2 cents. What Deepak Chopra talks about, right? Like your highest evolution is becoming the observer without judgment of your own self. So I'm being curious about me. Why did I have that amplified response to that situation? Or why did I go off the handle about that thing? Or why am I crying about what someone said who I don't love them, or I don't even know them, but I'm crying? I'm having some kind of a transference. Like, why is the curiosity is like that? We leave off, like, why are you being like a big baby and crying, right? Because that's the judgment piece. The curiosity is like, wow, these are really big emotions. What does this remind you of? So I have these 3 questions that I give clients to ask themselves to identify if they're having a transference, which is, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how or why is this behavioral dynamic, the dance that we're doing, as you were saying before, V, how is that familiar to me? And a lot of times the original perpetrator or injury maker will just pop into your mind like, oh my God, my boss reminds me so much of my mean ass father. Here we go. And now we understand, like, oh, this is where compassion, self-compassion can come in, you know?
I love what Terry said about the curiosity of our own experience, because there's like anything, there's a shadow side to curiosity. Because if I'm curious about your experience at the expense of owning and taking responsibility for mine, curiosity is no longer this really wonderful, helpful, relational thing. And you hear this when people say, why did they do that? Why did they do that? And I'm like, well, again, we can answer it. You can get insight, but you're still going to have a feeling. Why did they do that is often code for, I don't like that they did that.
Correct.
And we can change a lot of the why questions to, it's giving you a feeling. You feel a certain way about it. I don't understand why the person I'm dating didn't call me. I don't like that they did not call me. Is this relationship one I choose to continue? So curiosity does have a point at which it's no longer helpful. And then it's another way, like anything, where we don't want to go in and get curious about our own experience.
Yes. But Britt, you said something that it's so true in the why, because that's not your side of the street. It's literally unanswerable. Perhaps the person will tell you, maybe not, but how about just the better questions are? And this brings us right back to responsibility. When you say, I actually don't like that you didn't call me when you said you were going to call me on Friday. Who gives a crap about the why? What does it matter? Unless you got run over by a bus, right? That matters. But if short of you being dead, the person who was supposed to call me and didn't, I don't care about the why. You have anxious attachment issue, whatever your thing is. The real question is, and this, what we can have control over, as Kevin was saying before, is how we respond and react. And what you just said, Britt, do I decide? I have a conversation about the fact that I didn't like it, hopefully, because you want to set some boundaries. And then you make decisions. If the person continues to not call you when they say they're going to, you decide if you want to stay in this relationship. Their why is their therapy, you know?
Okay, part of this, back to that question, and Britt, you pulling out that observing, not evaluating, not judging. I mean, but if I can observe, when I was thinking about this prior to this, us talking here about the things that derail my responsibility, I am ever more aware of my propensity, and I think our cultures, to I just believe my own story, as you guys are talking about. I believe I have my experience. I know it's somewhat elementary, but I think it's the elementary stuff that we're dying from. We know how to eat healthy and well. It's all the knowledge is out there. It's not working in America for some reason. We know some of these things, but we believe our stories, and coming off of that is dramatic. It's one thing to go, okay, I get it. Yeah, I know I'm responding to my own perspective, but I really do believe it. I really, and letting that go can sometimes I'll own it. It sometimes feels like, it's the hardest thing to do, and to let go of the context I am bringing, the filter that I am bringing forward. But I would again go back to the media that we talked about a minute ago. It's story after story after story. There's no news headlines anymore. There's opinion headlines. I mean, it literally blows me away. I won't even name it. Somebody's home, family member, they had on one of the late night talk show hosts that I have not seen since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up with Johnny Carson and Letterman, and they'd kind of talk about the topics, whatever. But I listened to a 20-minute intro from this late night host that was the most dramatic opinion giving I had ever heard. They didn't do that back then, but that's the culture that we're in right now. It's opinion giving, it's story giving. We believe our stories. It feels overwhelming, honestly, to bring back. How do you address it then? How do you really address, to bring somebody off the ledge of thinking, wait a minute, my story's not real? That's big medicine. Thoughts?
I think the depiction of being on the ledge is right, because I think that probably is the way that it can be experienced, which is that to shift the story to some degree, especially if we've been holding on to it, gripping at it for a long time, it can kind of feel like a death. Right, where you're just like looking over, and I might fall there. I'm going to tumble. It's going to be dangerous. There's a threat here, because if my story, the story I've been telling myself for however many years or decades, is not entirely true. Let's not say it's wrong entirely, right? But let's just say there's some things that we could challenge within that story.
Yeah.
That's deeply confronting for people. It means that they might have to change. And, it's true, right? It's like when we hold and cling to something, then we don't have to do much about it, right? And then the moment that we start to open that piece up and explore, maybe there is something that's actually holding you back or getting in the way of the life that you say you'd like to live, or the type of relationship that you desire, right? Then it requires people to step into change, and for the purpose of this conversation, to step into ownership and responsibility and accountability. Right? I have to do something about something if this story is no longer entirely true, right? Because old stories often serve something that's dysfunctional for us. Right?
I think identifying that, though, V, is super helpful. So I always give people this secondary gain tool that I created. I didn't create secondary gain, but a tool so we can identify. So what is secondary gain? It's the unobvious gain we get for staying stuck. So if you ask yourself, Kevin, when you're thinking about your story, what do I get to not face, not feel, or not experience by staying stuck here? the unobvious gain so much of the time with what you're saying, because it's comfort.
Right.
I get to not be vulnerable. I get to not take a risk. I get to not have to not know what I'm doing, right? Like we love to be masterful, even if we're being masterful at things that we say we want to stop doing, right? Like managing other people's lives, let's say. But we're good at it. We're dialed into it. We have a whole stadium of data about other people and what they like and what they don't like, at least if you're a high functioning codependent, you do. So I think that that's sort of a way of looking at it. If you can go, what am I gaining? Rather than being in that confusion, really saying, what do I get to not face, not feel, not experience by staying stuck here?
Yeah. I love that. And if we're talking secondary gain and what am I holding on to and what might have to change as a result of letting go of my story, it's really hard to talk about responsibility if we're not talking also about grief. Because like our culture sucks at grief. Like it sucks. Like in our culture, generally speaking, grief is when someone is dead and then you only get a year before you are expected to get over it or whatever. But like, every change, every choice, every iteration of the people that we are requires us to say no to a whole bunch of other stuff. And then that requires grief. It's not going to be possible to take responsibility for the choices and the paths that I've taken if I'm not able or willing to grieve the losses and the changes and all of the things that are going to be different as a result of me not managing other people's reality. But grief is a tricky one. And I don't think you can do one without the other.
Okay,
so
I want to
major.
take that because I thought as you're saying that to grieve to some degree, if I'm looking, especially at taking responsibility for some of the hard things that have happened, some of the wounds, some of the things that I am holding on to, I would say, or I was going to ask, but I will ask, to be responsible for it, do I need to resolve it? Or in order to resolve it, do I need to take responsibility for it?
When you say resolve it, do you mean involve another person?
No, I mean, as I think, as Britt, you were talking about grief. I mean, I'm addressing that and letting myself grieve, and I've been looking at that recently because that's not something I ever really did. My therapist would say, sit in it, Kevin. Don't medicate. Don't run from it. Don't put on, do whatever you do. Sit in it. And I didn't do that in the past. I didn't grieve, and thus it was never resolved. And so I'm looking at grief as a methodology to get to a resolving, get to a, however you want to define that for me, just an acceptance of it and a peace with it. So I'm looking at this though. And as you say it, I'm thinking, I was literally, the question in my head was, okay, do I need to, in order to take responsibility for this thing in the past, do I need to grieve, resolve, or is it in the process of taking responsibility that gives me the ability to do so?
I think it's both and. I would say that the arrows go in all of the directions, and you're just sort of in this circle over and over and over again. And I do believe I always say when stuck, grieve more. And it's one of the steps in the origin healing practice that I talk about in the origins of you. And it's so vital to our healing. And I think it's probably more so that if you're able to access a bit of responsibility, that when you do that, it is going to be an invitation for you to naturally come to a grieving process. If you are able to access a bit of grief, when you do that, it is naturally going to bring you to some sense of responsibility. Right. And so that you just kind of continue on that cycle as it builds and as it grows. And when I say builds and grows, it also might, that might feel relieving, or resolving, dissipating. Right. And so, I would say that it's a both and that it doesn't really matter where your start point is, like whatever you might have access to. So I think responsibility a lot of times is up here, and then grief is more in the body. Right. And so some of us might be able to access it if we're thinking about it and, okay, here's what I need to be responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. And some of us might need to have more of an experiential, like I am experiencing my grief around something. And in doing that, it brings me a bit more to the responsibility that I want to take in my life. Quick side note, this 8-month pregnant lady must use the restroom. So I will be right back.
Way to take responsibility for your bio
responsibility here.
I love it.
It has to happen.
We'll keep rolling. Just go.
Keep rolling.
And keep rolling. All right. Sweet. Love it.
What I wanted to say about you specifically, and it's funny because you're very, straight male vibe, where you're like, how do we resolve it? I was going to fix this shit. How do we resolve it? And it's funny.
On that, Terry.
The language I would use is how what we're really doing when we're grieving these things that happened in the past. And Britt, obviously you're a super expert at this, is we are honoring, first acknowledging, honoring, integrating. And what I think, what that means, right, is that it's not separate from you. Your traumatic experiences, my traumatic experiences, they've all made me who I am. And me honoring them means I don't have to be stuck, frozen in time in the trauma, because I have warmed up the trauma by talking about it, doing EMDR on it, doing all the things that I do to resolve trauma, and it gets integrated. And the thing is, you wouldn't, right now, Kevin, if you hadn't had the exact traumatic experiences that you've had in your life, there's no way you'd be doing what you're doing. You wouldn't be this curious. You wouldn't be this interested. For you, pain has been part of the thing that is the volition, the moving you forward to want to do this stuff. And I'm sure Britt, I'm curious to know, Britt, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree 1,000%. And I love that we're talking about this because it does, and Vienna did a good job with the arrows. One begets the other and they go all around and relocate. And again, I'm so glad you jumped on that, Terry, because the word resolution, I'm like, so I was like, okay, be quiet. Just be curious. Sit back. Because this idea that we have to resolve trauma or resolve grief keeps us stuck because that's just not how human brains brain. It's like, Terry, you were talking about, it becomes woven into the tapestry and it becomes it's kind of confronting, to use V's word, to think about, wait, you're telling me that my sexual assault is now a beautiful part of the tapestry of my life? I'm not saying what happened was beautiful. I'm saying it happened objectively bad. And as I've woven it in, my life story isn't zoom focused on that one knot. I think you said, Terry, it's not that one knot, but that one knot then created the need for me to go to therapy, which then created the opportunity for me to learn about the brain, which then brought me to this conversation that we're having here. And that is not the same as saying I'm grateful for my trauma because my life is so good now. That's some bullshit. That's not what I'm saying.
Let's just not with that.
That's not what we're saying here. That is not
agreed.
Happening.
I'm over here in the chat and you're getting kudos for this aspect of, resolving. She says it feels yucky, so we'd rather resolve it to make the bad feelings go away. That's how it feels for me. Yeah, you're right. And Terry, you did it. You're welcome. Part of the reason I'm happy to be picked on as a resident guy here, but you did talk about offline. You mentioned the differences in regards to this topic of responsibility between men and women. It is one of the reasons I wanted you guys on, you gals on here, is because I see the difference. I don't want to be on here talking about it with 4 other guys. I have a very fluent guy's perspective. Yes. Straight white American 6 foot uber privileged guy perspective. And that I'm coming at it with, I know no marginalization at all. I don't have zero. If anything, I would be now marginalized for being the most privileged person on planet Earth. If that exists. But if you put that out there to say, okay, we're talking about this amongst 2 genders that experience the pursuit of maybe the understanding of responsibility different. So if you want to throw something out on that.
I definitely, most definitely
have things
for sure do.
Okay.
So, and we all do, I imagine, but I'm just going to start with, if you look at the way we're socialized, the way that we're socialized as women is to be pleasing, is to be compliant, is where's my happy girl? Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, which is not exactly anyone really giving a crap about your authentic self, so to speak. It's all like, just go along to get along, no fuss, no muss, Don't be a big mouth. Don't have a problem. Don't assert yourself. All of those things. And you are also responsible for how everyone feels, what everyone is doing, that everyone has what they need. We are the bridgers, the assuagers. I mean, think about historically, what were the roles? They're different. So we did have responsibility and still do in a different way. And I feel like it's changing, but it's slow. It's like at an iceberg like pace, the social change of responsibility. So again, you know, us talking about responsibility and blame. If you're a mother and you have a child who has something wrong with them, people are blaming the mother still, being like, well, what did she do wrong? Did she have him vaccinated or not? Did she do this? What is she feeding him? How is she? Did she breastfeed? Oh, she didn't breastfeed. That's definitely why it happened. Like, there is so much responsibility that is shoveled onto women. I see still in a different way, and I will not minimize the responsibilities that men feel to, if we're looking at it from that traditional provide, do the thing, go out, make the money, come home, do the lawn or whatever else that you do. But I just know from being I'm more of an expert in the female experience because it's my experience and what I've studied for years and years, the emotional labor that goes along with being a woman. You know, the toilet paper doesn't replace itself, right? The food doesn't come, you know, into the refrigerator alone. Now, many of us have more modern relationships where the division of labor is way more, in mine, it's actually my husband does more than I do. But I really feel like we've been set up for many generations to have this feeling of being overly responsible as women. So I wonder what you ladies think about that.
I'll take a little bit of a different thread with this, and I want to look at it
Please.
through the lens of us growing up. When I think back to being a kid, probably more of a teenager, and I think what you were saying about the conditioning and programming, obviously, like spot on. And I think that this plays into it. But I want to look at it relationally. What I've noticed with girls, probably more than with boys, is that when there is a frustration in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or something that's romantic, girls often band together and they say, "Oh, that person, gosh, screw him," right? Or "Oh, such an ass." Or, "Oh, that friend over there, she really screwed you over." Da, 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 da. It's this quick space to go to, you did nothing wrong. Let's not take a look at your participation in this whatsoever. I am here to be your ally through and through, no matter what. I've got your back. I'm your ride or die, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So a version of that, which I think, again, maybe we're talking about different threads here. And I love what you said, Terry, but I think there is something about like what has kept certain people, right, from being able to see their part. Now, boys, or like, boys, teenagers, young men, I think they maybe hold each other a little bit more responsible when it comes to that type of a thing. You get into a conflict with a friend, your partner is upset about something, and I think they're more likely to say, well, what did you do? You know, or like, what, like, how were you involved in it? And so I just want to take the thread of that type of responsibility, because when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was that person for sure. And if my friend didn't just say, "Vienna, you are so right. Oh my gosh, I can't believe," like, I would have given back the other part of my necklace. BFF, AE, like, forget it. Get out of here.
Yep.
I don't want, like, no. I want to be validate, right? So I think there's something about that I would just bring forward. I don't know how relevant or important it is, but just want to take a different thread with it in terms of responsibility. And I don't know, how that pulls through in terms of adult relationships. I think I can see that playing out as adults too, at times.
But Kevin, what do you think about the male on male thing? Like what she was saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, we suffer mostly just by not even getting into it.
That was what was in my mind. Yep.
Yeah, I have some guys that every Friday we meet for coffee, and we've done it for I don't know, 15 years now or more. And the propensity is to not even get into it, to talk about the thing. I mean, I'm not a chit chatter, so I'm not sitting there talking about sports or whatnot, but I can get excited and talk about my thoughts and ideas. That's my world, man. Let's talk about thoughts, ideas, concepts, opportunities, possibilities. And I can get vulnerable with stuff that I'm, pursuing in my personal growth, especially now. But my tendency will be to not bring up the conflict that I had with my wife or a kid. So we know each other personally enough to go in there, and we're often still, it's kind of like gosh, okay, we're not supposed to fix, but do you want to fix? I got one. And we'll juggle that a little bit with, am I supposed to just listen? So again, I've got a group where I'm talking with you guys and I get to bring that back. So we may have a little bit of a different evolution, but it's not natural. It has to be an intentional aspect of, even I've got some groups now like mastermind stuff, and I'm really interested in hey, what's working? What's not working? We don't even bring that up socially, and it brings up the best stuff, but I don't look forward to it. I'm still looking at how do I bring up the what's not working without ruining my credibility? I mean, that's still, I'll watch that come in and go, holy crap, man. And yeah, so I agree that but we will do it. We will do it. I mean, I've got my friends who sometimes I feel like they're waiting to call me out on it and to force some accountability.
If you blow up your life or you're having a conflict in a relationship with one of your buddies, do your other friends say, yeah, the other dude is the problem, like that? Like, is that where it goes to?
But I'd venture you don't even have conflicts with your buddies. That's my guess, because you would have to be really intimate to have conflict. Am I wrong? When's the last time you had a conflict with your buddy?
Historically, yes. I have been, probably to call it privileged, to even in the recent past couple years to have some, I don't know if I'd even call it conflict, but to get some real and go, that's irritating. And to have it, and it's hard for me. So I have to force it out for me because I'm very conflict averse. I have some friends who are not, and I watch them and I had a therapist tell me that you don't have a file for that, do you, Kevin? And I don't, just to be honest and come out and say what you think. And I know you love me. I know you care about me. So yeah, I still struggle to go there. It's why I have you. One of you talked about that. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. I think you said that, Terry. I'm here because I'm so interested in my own blindness. I used to be ashamed of it. Now I am more, I'm going to use that word again, enamored. And I'm interested because it feels like that's the hope. That's the inspiration, is where I don't know what I don't know. And that's what bothers me most. So I want to know, as a long answer to that. Yeah, you guys are tracking though. I mean, my gosh, Vienna, I mean, Connor is that's
what I was going to bring up.
I know he's a leader of guys.
I know. I'm surrounded. This is why I'm like, oh, right. I'm reminded that most men, are not necessarily operating this way. I'm around a lot of men who, when they do have conflict, like that they do bring this forward, or they do hold each other accountable, or they encourage each other to hold themselves accountable. Maybe I should say instead. So they do.
Again, you've got I would say a skewed context with Connor and his group, and I probably do with mine. If we look out here historically, Connor's a source for this kind of stuff, but I am aware, even in my experience, of people who are, people have on the show some of these best-selling authors and intellects and Ivy League professors and whatever. And then you go behind and realize that they're pretty alone, and there's really nobody that they're talking honestly with. And I think there's a growing desire for that. And I'm thankful. I think we're coming to a generational change, just like back to what you talked about, Terry, some of the stereotypical roles, man. I don't know. It feels like some way, the only way we're going to get out of them is getting rid of some generations. It's so ingrained.
It is, but Kevin, you said something. Can I play the pick on Kevin game? I haven't taken a turn at that yet.
Please.
So when you were talking about your guys group, I so appreciate, by the way, that like you opened the space for this. You were like, I'm so excited to share my thoughts. And it's like, yeah, but like, what if you went to your group on next Friday and shared your feelings?
Yeah.
Like, forget about like getting rid of generations and creating systemic, like, what if like, as women, and Vienna, you are so good at you are great at holding validating space without co-signing on like crap. It's like you feel so loved and like kicked at the same time in the most wonderful way, because you can validate without enabling.
Right.
And for you, Kevin, it's like, what would it be like for you to not vulnerably in terms of I'm sharing something that I'm not super sure about, but actually be in a feeling state with your guys and like offer up one of those feelings things?
Well, I can tell you, because I've been working on that. The number one word for me is incompetent. I feel incompetent. I even want to use the word, sometimes it's a very guy word, impotent, somewhat. It's an area that I don't feel fluent in. You want to talk about ideas, and even this, I mean, this is flow for me. I mean, I wonder, am I really even thinking? I just talk, and I love this. I love this kind of, we're not talking about my feelings right now.
How do you feel then? How do you feel right now? What are you feeling in your body, Kevin?
Well, that's not, this is flow. This is a high inspiration. This is a dopamine hit. Bottom line, it is to talk with you guys and to talk about these things that matter is a dopamine hit. When I go into the feelings, it's incompetent. It's just, I'm not fluent. I'm just not fluent. I'm more at peace with it now conceptually. Of going, I don't feel as fearful, I think, as I used to, but I do feel incompetent. And I see that with guys. It's just kind of like, let's do the next 10 minutes and speak it in Spanish. Oh my gosh, I'm really gonna have to think about this. How do you say that? How do you put those words together? And which is, I literally go back to Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart to try to get more vernacular around the feelings, because I don't know them. It was through her that I realized humiliation is a word I resonated with. Never would have used that. Disgust. Yeah. I never would have used that. So
one of the things that I've learned from Connor, and for those who are listening who have no context for that, is my husband works strictly with men and does really beautiful work, is that the majority of men do feel incompetent when it comes to what is it that I'm feeling. And the shift to what is it that you're experiencing, or what's the sensation in your body, or like, where did I feel most affected in this conversation? Right? Like those things can sometimes give us a different access point, because otherwise you're already running this storyline that you're incompetent when it comes to feelings. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling anything, or like, but I've got lots of thoughts and ideas, and that's what I can do well. But how am I experiencing?
Where do I feel this in my body? Is this a trick question?
Yeah, you're like, I don't. I'm cut. Yeah, like I'm cut off. There's nothing there. And also, like, am I experiencing anything? Like the moments when you scribble something down, I imagine, are the moments where you are experiencing something. Right? Yes. When you're like, ooh, this is a thing that is doing something to me. If I were just, listen, you're managing a podcast right now and you're leading us in a conversation. That's a lot to be juggling. And so I don't know that we necessarily have to pivot this. Maybe you'll have us back for a deep therapy session for Kevin one day. He's like,
please.
Absolutely not. But yeah, right. It's like those moments, right, where you're jotting something down. I would gather are moments where you are actually being affected by something. And if you learned how to just be more connected to that, even if you were like, oh, it feels hot in my chest, or tingly in my chest, or I noticed my leg do this thing, or, something like that, that begins to be an access point for you.
Totally. Yeah. It has to be intentional. So now in journaling, I sit down and man, I can go all day on my thoughts, my ideas. It's okay. Stop. What do you feel? And that takes effort. That takes effort, but it's an effort that I want. Yeah.
I think
try replacing it with experience.
Sorry.
Experience. Okay.
Yeah. Instead of asking yourself, what am I feeling right now? Replace it with what am I experiencing? What am I noticing?
Yeah. I love the direction because it's about me. Thanks. You guys can invoice me, and that's how I often feel. I want to, and I know we're kind of at the end here. I could keep going forever. I'm so grateful for this. I love there's so many questions that came in. I tried to do justice to them. It's our first time doing this. I did want to ask just on this blame. And even if we anchor here, I wanted to get that piece in, Terry. Thanks for bringing that up. Some of the differences of men and women and how we look at this aspect of responsibility and blame. But when we look at blame, I want your thoughts on what is I don't know if it's a fair question, but it's the best I can come up with. What is the opposite of blame? Because it's easy to say, okay, the opposite of blame, is it responsibility? Give us some context, because we can hear that and go, okay, I know I have that propensity. I think we have a human propensity to want to blame. Well, I hurt because you hit me. I'm frustrated because, when we go to the justification of why, okay, and I want to blame. So that's in here. Okay, so now I'm not going to. And for a guy, it's just, so I just wall off. I just shut off the emotions, withdraw, stonewall, whatever, and go, no, there's something else out there. I want to take the blame that I feel, the frustration, and do something with it. Maybe it's not fair or simple enough to say what's the opposite of that, but this is a great takeaway for folks. Okay, don't blame. Britt, are you thinking?
I'm getting all twitchy because I'm like, the opposite of blame is not forgiveness. Like I've heard it said in lots of different spaces that, instead of blame, the opposite of blame is to forgive. And neither are necessarily forgiveness is a beautiful spiritual ideal. And if that falls into your system of beliefs, that's great. But forgiveness is not required to heal trauma. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily have to be there to create new neural pathways or to take responsibility. So I don't know what the opposite of blame is, but I do know that it is not forgiveness.
Okay, fair.
Yes.
Thank you.
So with you on that. I feel like forgiveness has been co-opted by religious spirituality. It's got all these connotations where you're like, somehow I feel like we're giving somebody a pass. I always say, like, it's really just about letting yourself out of resentment prison, because that's really what we're doing, is just stop letting people take up valuable real estate in your brain. That's it. So why do we want to move through this and release it? But what you're asking, Kev, I just want my 2 cents on the opposite of blame is that when something happens, if we're talking about, it matters. The context of what we're discussing right now matters. If we're talking about something that happened when I was 5, there's one thought about blame. If we're talking about something that happened 5 minutes ago, I have another thought about blame. Because as a grown-up, there's something I can do. If I am injured by someone, I can have a conversation. I can call a meeting. I can text them. I can call them. I can say, hey, I did not appreciate that you told Betty what I told you in confidence. Makes me not trust you. Really broke my trust. And I'm really mad about it. And don't do it again. Or whatever. And they can either say, you're an idiot, or I agree with you, or I won't, or I'm sorry. Right? There's reparative actions we can take as adults. If we're talking about things that happened in the past, we need to, at least for the first time, I always say to my clients who are resistant to blame, like, it happened 30 years ago. I don't want to blame my parents. They did better than their crappy parents, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I'm all like, listen, we have to say the truth. You at least once in your therapeutic life, if you're dealing with trauma and dealing with injuries, it could be little T or big T trauma, right? It doesn't have to be just big T. You have to tell the truth. If you were a 5-year-old kid and someone was physically abusing you, they deserve blame. They did a wrong thing. They were the grown-up. They did the wrong thing. So we place that blame at their feet where it belongs. And then we take our power by deciding that, what do we need to do to heal that? How do we integrate that experience? What do I need to do now so I can release myself from resentment prison?
It's really well said. Yeah, because I think you are just talking about the shift from disempowerment to empowerment, right?
Yes.
And I love that you made the distinction, which I think is so important, about being a child, right, versus being an adult when it comes to blame. There is no world in which there is anything for a child to do in relation to adults, no matter what it is. So I want to be uber clear about that. And maybe there's a distinction too when we're thinking about blaming others versus blaming ourselves. I'm not sure, but I think this shift into an empowered state, that like the release of the resentment prison, right? That in order, it's movement, right? If we said before that blame is stuckness, then maybe the opposite of blame is movement, right? Is being able to actually shift something or change something or go from disempowered to empowered. So maybe that's the best I've got for it.
I like it.
Somebody should write like the science of stuck. It'd be a great topic.
Buying that URL right now.
Yeah, guys, thank you. I'm going to say bye to our guests. So you and I can stick with me just for a moment here. But folks, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for the questions. And we will follow up with this in the days to come. Guys, thank you so much for the gift of being here with me and collaborating on this discussion. I trust we did it justice. Well, friends, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Again, you can get involved with the next session that we have and be there live as we record. Ask live questions. Go to wisdomsessions.live, Live. You just give your email address so you can get notified. It's free. We're not selling anything. It's just to have you participate with us. If you're into Instagram, all these therapists have really big followings. They post daily on there. You can find Britt Frank at Britt Frank. You can find Terry Cole at Terry Cole, Terri Cole. She also has a podcast you can look up right now, The Terry Cole Show. And then Vienna Farron on Instagram is at Mindful MFT. Marriage Family Therapist, Mindful MFT. And her podcast is This Keeps Happening with Vienna Farron. Friends, again, you got any comments on this, any feedback? I would be honored to hear it. Find me, email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.